Move on to the papers now. Dipti is with us today, and we're starting with the independent candidate Emmanuel Macron for the French presidential election, of course. He's given an interview today to Le Croix newspaper, hasn't he?
That's right, Stuart. Macron s'explique. Macron explains himself. He lays out his vision for his electoral campaign. That's what the Catholic paper La Croix says on its front page. He's shedding light on his program, addressing issues like medically assisted procreation, euthanasia, but you kind of get the feeling that his focus is clearly on targeting abuse of political power. For instance, he wants to ban MPs from being able to exercise their parliamentary duties and, for instance, run consulting firms in the private sector at the same time. He also wants to restrict the ease with which MPs who work in the private sector can come back to the public sector. And finally, he wants to ban MPs from being able to hire members of their family as assistants.
Now, he's also addressed certain question marks about his own personal fortune, hasn't he?
That's right. There have been some question marks or brewing scandals around Emmanuel Macron, if you like. First of all, the question of how he could have a personal fortune of, some might say, just 200,000 euros, despite having earned a lot of money as a banker in his previous career. Well, to this, Macron attributes the weight of French taxes. He says he paid a lot of taxes. And he also says there were a lot of renovations undertaken at his wife's house. On another question mark, he also firmly denies any wrongdoing concerning a Las Vegas party held during the Consumer Electronics Show last year. He says he's putting the blame squarely on the French business agency.
OK, well, that's Emmanuel Macron in Les Echos. Another candidate on the front page of Les Echos, rather. The other one was Le Croix, wasn't it? Talking about his electoral programme.
Well, that's François Fillon. He says, we need to return to the way France was before, I quote, the madness of the Socialist Party. The Conservative presidential candidate is promising in his campaign a vote on getting rid of the famous 35-hour work week in France. He's also talking about labour reforms and reviewing the minimum retirement age, all of which are very contentious issues in France, as we've seen in the past. Fillon says he has no, quote, illusions about the fact that he will have to talk to prosecutors investigating him into the so-called fake job scandal. He also addresses claims from a French Sunday paper that a generous friend of his gave him 13,000 euros worth of suits.
That's a lot of suits, expensive suits.
That's a lot of expensive suits.
Yeah.
Fillon has responded with an emphatic, so what? And critiques this scrutiny around his personal life once again.
OK, I wouldn't mind a suit that was worth that much money, I have to say. Le Figaro, the right-leaning paper, is also talking about François Fillon.
That's right. Fillon has 6 weeks to convince. That's what Le Figaro says on its front page. Fillon, of course, who's presenting his electoral program today around 3 main axes: cutting the red tape in the French labor industry, protecting the French people, and, quote, reconciling French people with themselves. After a chaotic and disastrous beginning, Fillon is trying to relaunch his presidential campaign, but it's one that's on, quote, life support. That's what Huffington Post says. The website says that Fillon's had to reach out to Nicolas Sarkozy, the former French president, his base for support. And as a result, he's having to sort of backtrack on some key promises he made when he won the primaries last year. Le Parisien reports that within his party, some members are skeptical whether Fillon even has a shot at winning. One MP, I quote, says, a victory would be a miracle, not exactly fighting words, Stuart.
Very true. Now, the other main candidates, I'm talking about Marine Le Pen, Benoit Hamon, they've also been busy campaigning over the weekend as well.
Well, Marine Le Pen was on her charm offensive in a small town in central France called Châteauroux, one that Les Echos says is facing massive economic problems. Basically, industries that were sort of propping up the local economy there have moved out. As a result, there's a lot of job losses, a lot of loss in revenue for the town. And Le Pen is really appealing to those disillusioned voters there, much like Donald Trump did last year. And that's really working in her favor. Les Echos says she's getting good polls from these kind of small towns who are willing to go out and vote en masse for her. Now, Benoit Hamon, the Socialist Party's candidate, well, we haven't heard much from him, but he's been in Guadeloupe, France's overseas territory. He's had a complicated start to his campaign, but he was in Guadeloupe, basically reminding voters of François Hollande's achievements there and trying to curry favor with voters there.
Okay, we're going to end on Le Parisien. Investigation into something that's also dominating the elections, in fact. Now, this is whether or not to legalise cannabis.
That's right. It's becoming a pretty important electoral campaign theme, if you like, Stuart. Once a week, Le Parisien, the newspaper, explores in depth an electoral theme. And this week, it's whether or not to legalise cannabis. Now, in terms of who supports it and doesn't, it's pretty predictable. In favor of legalizing it, mainly the left-leaning candidates Benoit Hamon and Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Against it, the conservative candidates Fillon, Le Pen, and also Emmanuel Macron. Now, what's interesting is Le Parisien explains that the French are among the biggest consumers of cannabis in Europe. Among the stats, nearly 1 in 2 young people aged 17 have already tried cannabis at least once. And one woman interviewed, as you see in this article here, one woman interviewed by the paper, she's against legalization. She says, if you legalize it, young people are just going to smoke it even more freely.
You certainly smell it enough as you walk around the streets of
That's
Paris.
for sure.
Not that I have any idea, of course, what it smells like, I have to add. Thanks, Ditty, with the papers on France 24.